Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the next lesson of Tanya. Today, we're going to do chapter 9, which really is a new section of Tanya.
Is it okay if I just listen?
Yeah.
My eyes are tired.
Yep, absolutely. It's a new section of Tanya because what we've done so far in the first 8 chapters is laid down the ground rules. We started off with a very ambitious proposition that we're going to understand the workings of the human soul. I mean, that's pretty ambitious. And the Alter Rebbe goes straight into it. He says, listen, it's not one, it's 2 souls. And each soul he introduced us to. He says each one has 10 faculties, the three intellectual and the 7 emotional faculties. Each soul has 3 garments, which is thought, speech, and action. Well, there's only one thought, speech, and action in the body, but the soul can only express itself through thought, speech, and action. And we explained the essence of each soul, that the essence of the godly soul was godly. It was centered around God. It's truly an out-of-body experience. And that the animal soul is self-centered. It's self-centered. Good morning, Rosa. It's the animal soul is a self-centered soul. It's serving self, right? And this is a very powerful theme that we developed as we got to know our 2 souls. And today we're going to start a chapter 9, which is going to introduce us to how they interact with each other. It would be okay if these 2 souls were separate from each other. It's like, but when you put them into the same body, it's like putting a lion and a human inside of a same cage. It's not going to be pretty. You know? Someone's going to get hurt. And that's what's happening over here when the godly soul and the animal soul are both stuffed into the same body. It's pretty claustrophobic in here. That's what's happening, which explains a lot of our dysfunction. Remember what it says at the introduction of Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe wrote this book because he didn't have enough time to answer people's questions in person. So he says he wrote this book im kol hatshuvas al kol hashaylos, with all the answers to all the questions.
Oh my gosh.
And there's a Hasidic tradition that what that meant was that he didn't just write this book. It was truly divinely inspired. Remember, don't forget that the Alter Rebbe sat in jail for 53 days under there was an accusation that he was supporting the Turks. Do you remember his granddaughter, Menucha Rachel, my grandmother, went to live in Hebron, and he sent monies to the Jewish community in Hebron. Well, he sent it to Israel, right? To the Jewish community in Hebron. So somebody slandered him that he was sending money to the Turks, to the Ottoman Empire, which is the polar opposite of the Russians, of the Tsar. So it sounded like he was supporting the enemy. So on a literal level, on a shallow level, he was sent to jail because he was supporting, it was like treason. But on a spiritual level, the reason that the Alter Rebbe was sent to jail is because in heaven they were upset that he was teaching these 53 secrets of God to mankind. These people don't deserve it. Remember, like it says in the Medrash about when the Torah was given, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai in Shavuos, and he wants to receive the Torah, and the angels are having a tug of war with him over the Torah. They're like, you can't take this incredible, brilliant, dazzling light and give it to mere mortals. You can't do that. You can't violate the Torah. It's like taking a precious diamond, a 24-karat diamond, and giving it to preschool kids. Like, you can't do that. That's like, doesn't even make any sense.
They don't understand.
Worse than that is what happened when the Torah was given to us. We who, have struggled with our avarice and gluttony and our ego and whatever else, right? It's worse when we receive something which is far greater than diamonds. It's the Torah. It's going far lower than preschool children because preschool children are just naive. We're downright malicious, right? So it's much worse, right? What happens here is that the Torah was given to Moses despite the objections of the angels. What was the point I was saying before? How did I get onto the giving of the Torah? Because in heaven they were protesting The Alter Rebbe revealing the secrets of Torah, the secrets of godliness. It's one thing to give the secrets of Torah to mankind, but the secrets of Pnimius HaTorah, the secrets of the inwardness, the soul of Torah, to waste that on mankind, that was unacceptable. And that's why the Alter Rebbe sat in jail for 53 days. During those 53 days, he said that he saw the faces of his teacher and his teacher and teacher's teacher, whom he called the Zayda, and his father, the Maggid of Mezrich, and the Baal Shem Tov, and their faces were black, as if to say that their teachings were in danger. But in any event, the point I'm trying to make is that these teachings are profound godly wisdom. It's not just self-help.
Was he fasting when he wrote it? Like, did they feed him in jail? I was just wondering, because I know, like,
he didn't write it in jail.
Fasted
He didn't write it in jail, though. He sat in jail after he wrote it.
Oh, he sat in jail after.
Yeah, he didn't write it in jail.
I thought he wrote it.
I
No.
thought so too.
No.
Okay.
No. So, whether he was fasting while he wrote it, I don't know. But anyways, I'm assuming he would have been in an elevated state when he wrote it, but I don't know. Point is that inside the Tanya is kol ha'tshuvas al kol ha'shavas. All the answers to all the questions. Why? Because we who deal with so much dysfunction in our own souls, in our own lives, are able to find clues and guidance and answers and healing within the Tanya. That's what I always tell people. I say, listen, Tanya is going to be healing. It's light for your soul. And you can start to see this developing now when you realize that you start feeling claustrophobic. When you realize how claustrophobic it is inside of yourself, and how much conflict and turmoil and chaos is inside of us by virtue of being human, of being Jewish, you can start to see this pattern. Like, oh, that's why I'm always so conflicted. That's why I'm always so anxious. Or what is some of the various conditions which we Jews suffer from, right?
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
This is a sort of a summarized and guided portion of Kabbalah, right?
Yeah.
And Maimonides' guide for the perplexed was to some extent that too. And the goal of that was also provide answers to questions. But this is a lot different in
Very different.
every sense.
It is.
Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed is just as its name implies, for the perplexed. It's for the confused. It's for the wayward souls. This is the book of intermediaries, for Beinanim. It's for normal people. Primarily, you have to remember the context in which Rambam wrote it. There were the Muslim philosophers at those times, and there was this. There was a lot of this. What's it called? Chakira, which is investigation of godliness, so to speak. A lot of philosophical questions, more philosophical questions that were being raised, and people were struggling with them, and that's in response to that is where the Rambam wrote to the Guide to the Perplexed. It was more of a philosophical treatise, not relating to man as much as it was more about God. Yeah, it was more about God, more about the universe.
Okay.
But this is deeply personal. The Tanya was custom built for our people, for our generations, the past 7 generations. It's more. Maimonides is written 900 years ago almost, right? Okay. So in chapter 9, we're now suddenly introduced to the showdown and the engagement between these two souls. Okay? And here's how it goes. One thing I just want to remind you of is we've learned this principle which will be coming up over and over and over again. A term which hopefully we'll be able to assimilate into our lexicon, which is the term of klipa.
Of what?
Klipa. Klipa. Klipa means, in Hebrew, it means a shield, a peel or a shell, a covering, right? Generally speaking, the term klipa means a distraction from what you're supposed to be focused on. You're supposed to be focused on the fruit, right? When you have a klipa, you miss the fruit for the peel. You miss the forest for the trees, right? You forget what you're supposed to be going, and you take an exit, you get distracted. So klipa means a diversion or a distraction, and it's used to describe the forces of impurity. There's 2 kinds of klipa we learned about last week. Chapter 7 and 8. There's the klipa, which is neutral. The klipa which is neutral, we said, is the called klipas noga, which is the klipa of light, the peel of light. It doesn't totally hide the fruit. It's sort of transparent, but it's still annoying. It's in the way. It's a neutral energy. We said you can use it either way. You can, depending how you use it. If the purpose, the intent of what you use it for is godly, it gets elevated. Hence the term mutar, permissible. In English, permissible means something you are allowed to do. In Hebrew, mutar means able to be elevated. It means unlocked, unchained, unhinged. That's what mutar means in Hebrew. It's able to be elevated, which means you're not just allowed to do it, you must do it. Engage and pick it up. On the flip side, if you use it for the wrong reason, for self-indulgence, and like we just learned in Kuntrus Umayin, right? If you use a permissible thing for the wrong reasons, for self-indulgence, what you're doing is that you're schlepping it down into what's called the three impure klipos. Shalosh klipos hatmeis, the three impure klipos. We said they were opaque. There was the translucent peel, which is the klipas noga, the middle level, and then there's the opaque klipa, which is the opaque klipa. You can't see through it; it completely hides the fruit. That's total impurity, and there it becomes asur, it becomes chained, tied up. And we spoke about in the previous chapters about how you can pick it out of there. We said you can't really pick it out of there, but your teshuvah is able to reverse it, to pick it up. And then we said that in chapter 8 we said that the second kind of klipa is the opaque klipa, that which is totally forbidden. Now in English, forbidden means a no-fly zone, but in Hebrew, somewhere you can't go. But in Hebrew, asur means chained, locked up. It means the reason you can't go there is because you can't elevate this thing. It's not in your capacity to fix.
Unless you're God.
Unless you're God.
Who's Matiras.
Who's Matiras Surim, exactly, who releases the bound. We also said when Mashiach will come, he's going to release those. And we also said that there is one way to elevate even the klipa. We spoke about it last week with the question that Gail asked. There is one way to elevate that, even that which has fallen into the impure klippas, the opaque klippas. And that is through tshuva meyahava, tshuva out of love, which is a deeper kind of tshuva. It's not tshuva out of fear. It's tshuva out of love. It's far deeper level of teshuva. Okay? By the way, this is why you have to be so careful with kosher food, for example. You gotta be careful with kosher food. It's not just about does it have the OU or doesn't have the OU. You know, if you make a mistake, you're training yourself up to negative energies. You're tying yourself up to like darkness and forces of evil and impurity. You're drawing darkness upon your soul. So it's not just about, I'm not so religious, I'm not gonna worry about every silly little detail. It's not just about religion. It's about light and dark and positive and negative energies. Right? You want to be tethered with a sandbag that's holding you down from rising up or not. Right? It's going to chain you down. And one theme which we developed last week was the theme of how everything depends on our mind. Everything depends on our intent, on our kavanah. Everything that we engage in this world, the question is why you engage it. Are you engaging it for a holy purpose or are you engaging it for an unholy purpose? It's exactly what we learned in Kuntrus Umayin moments ago, right? That you could take something, forget the prohibited stuff, the permissible stuff. Why are you doing it? Why are you eating the meat? Are you eating the meat because it's Shabbos? Or are you eating the meat because you just can't wait to taste it? Right? That's self-serving. That's ego. That would be serving the animal soul.
But like you said, you can't wait to taste it. But I think you start to draw a fine line there too.
Yeah, you can draw a fine line. Absolutely.
Because you can't wait to taste it, but this is some of God's creation.
In honor of Shabbos. Or I can't wait to taste it because my taste buds are just chomping at the bit to serve myself. My sense of self. Exactly, and I like that you've identified even that discrepancy. That only you can be the judge of why you're doing anything, right? And you'll notice that many times in Torah it says, honor the elderly, I am Hashem your God. Why does he have to remind us? By the way, status check, I am God. Like, why do we need to know this? So it's explained. The reason it says I am God because many mitzvahs, particularly those mitzvahs that nobody can tell the difference about whether you did it in the right way or the wrong way. He says, I'm God, I know. You're sitting on the bus, and did you just not notice the old lady standing?
Yeah.
Or you made yourself not notice. You could probably get away with it in a court of law, but I'm God.
I was noticing that in a lot of after a lot of the commandments.
Right? A lot of those commandments are all the ones that are impossible to prove in a human court. But he says, I know.
And they have that ending.
Yeah, I'm God, you God.
But you know also.
You know also, exactly. You know and he knows, yeah. Nobody else knows, right? I just want to say one last thing before we get into today, and that's just a conclusion of last week's chapter, is like this. Is that when engaging with Klippas Noga, with Shalosh Klippas Atmeis, we said you get chained down, right? It's a pretty bad thing. But even when engaged with Klippas Noga, which is the opaque Klippa, which is the neutral energy, the translucent, I'm sorry. When engaging with the translucent peel, which is Klippas Noga, even if you did teshuvah to fix it, right? So let's say you've picked up, you engaged with something physical, let's say the food, for selfish reasons. So it's neutral energy, and you schlepped it down, and then you picked it up through tshuva meyahava, tshuva out of love. Your body, nevertheless, derived pleasure and benefit from the actual klippa. So your body has been sustained and nourished by the klippa, by the negative energy, and that residue remains even after you've done teshuvah, and even after you've released the klippa itself has been uplifted. But the part that sustained and nourished your body has like impurities. It's like, when you what do they do to metals? They put them in a smelter, and they separate the impurities. They're there. They're just sort of hidden. You just gotta separate the impurities. The metals, you've got to bring them to certain heats to separate the silver from the other metals, right?
But you're saying your body contains the impurities.
So you can never get rid of it.
No. So when do you get rid of it? Exactly. When do you get rid of it, Roslyn? So you get rid of it in a very interesting period of your life called Chibut HaKever.
Oh, really?
You get rid of it in the time of your life, right after you die, called Chibut HaKever. Chibut HaKever means the banging of the grave. The banging of the grave. Sounds very pleasant, right?
Yeah,
basically, the way it works is like this.
It has something to do with worms that devour the body.
It's not actually worms. It's described in the writings as follows. That there's an angel filled with eyes. Don't ask me what that means.
Oh, that's nice.
Covered in eyes. And he comes to you after you die. And he asks you your name. And you don't know your name. And if you don't know your name, then he knows that you haven't lived a righteous life. And he beats you up in the grave.
That's really not nice.
It doesn't sound nice. It doesn't sound nice.
It's getting too close.
Whether what I'm telling you right now, how much of what I'm telling you right now is a metaphor, I don't know. I have to tell you, I don't know.
I think it's all
Right? So obviously an angel covered in eyes.
Let us know.
An angel bear in mind, an angel covered in eyes is not a physical thing, right? And beating up a body which is already dead, it doesn't make any sense.
a third eye that can see deeper.
Yeah, maybe there's some sort of a metaphor there about a third eye that sees deeper, whatever. I'm just sort of letting you know what it says, and we're just going to discuss it a little bit.
From Kabbalah?
But here's what I want to tell you. Well, before we get into that, let me give you another example, which might clarify this. There's another punishment of the grave. It's called kafakela, which translates as the hollow of the sling. Of the sling, because there's an angel that whips you around in like a slingshot. Sounds brutal, right? I guess it's like going to
After this
it's like going to Orlando. It's what I feel like when I go to Orlando. My kids force me onto the roller coaster. I feel like I'm in kafakela. I'm in this hollow of a sling. I'm like, why are we doing this again? So
soul. That's what I was.
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
So obviously on a literal level, it means that somehow the body is flung around in a slingshot. I don't think cremation is going to help you, Rosalind, because what it really means is that just like the hollow of a sling gets flung at high speed from one extreme to the other extreme and back and forth and back and forth, what happens to the soul is that the soul is exposed to the two extremes of its life. On the one hand, the godly essence from whence it originates and where it is now. And then to the depravity in which it lived. And that's a pretty brutal experience.
It's living in the gap between knowing what you could have been and who you were. And we're supposed to do it in our life.
Could have been or should have been, exactly.
Yeah, it's like that.
Imagine
gap
watching
is
two
more
movies.
possible, yeah.
Imagine being sitting in a theater, right, with all of your family, loved ones, right? And they're showing you two screens. This is the life that you were supposed to live. And this life is you actually lived. Oh my God. I
Ideal you and the real you.
Right, so it's described also, by the way, they speak of a Gehinnom.
Yeah.
Gehinnom, which is purgatory. So they speak of purgatory of fire. What does it mean, purgatory of fire? This is how I teach it.
Hell.
Yeah, so what does that mean? Does that mean like some sort of fire pit with pitchforks?
Yeah.
The way I teach it is that when you're experiencing the shame of what you actually did,
Yeah.
and you're sitting there with the person or the entity that believed in you more than anyone else, like your mother or your God who put you in this earth because I believe in you, right? And now you're sitting there with the one that believes in you, your sponsor, right? And you're like, OMG, because you know what's going to happen next in this film. And the blood is just rushing to your face. That's how I teach the theme of Gehinnom Shel Eish, Gehinnom of fire.
That makes total sense.
And then there's another concept of Gehinnom Shel Sheleg, which is Gehinnom of snow. What's that? They send you to the Arctic? Siberia? What are they doing to you here now, right? So the way I teach it is that sometimes beyond the shame of that film which you're watching, sometimes the scene is so bad that the blood is not rushing to your face anymore. Now the blood is rushing from your face because you're not experiencing shame. Now you're experiencing downright terror from the next scene because you know what's about to happen. You know when you said the wrong thing. You know when you weren't. But then there's something that you did which was so bad. It was so bad. You're like,
Rabbi.
and then the blood rushes from your face.
Yeah.
That's how I teach Gehinnom Shel Sheleg, which is the purgatory of snow, right? So, what if you've done teshuvah? If you've done teshuvah, then it's erased. If you've done teshuvah, it's erased. It becomes good.
Well,
That's what it says. We learned last week. Remember in your question, your deliberate sin becomes a mitzvah. That's what we learned last week.
But you just said you can't get rid of everything.
Oh, hang on. Yeah, so there's that little bit of residue. Hang on. So I'm getting back to the beating of the grave yet.
Jewish guilt. And that's what you're teaching us. Jewish guilt. That comedians talk about all the Jewish comedians in the Borscht talk about Jewish guilt. And everyone that's Jewish grows up.
I'm explaining it to you, really. I'm only explaining it to you. I'm not teaching you something you don't already know or feel. I'm just putting it into perspective, that's all.
well,
Of course. The teshuvah deletes it. It's like a backspace.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that whatever you just described is something that you can and ideally should experience while you're alive.
Yeah.
On Yom Kippur or whatever
Absolutely.
day. And
Turns it around.
And then
very
it is. It's an
reassuring.
internal hell. I've been through, like,
Yes.
looking back.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I did experience in this lifetime.
But Gail, you can't get rid of it according to what.
Well, hang on.
Rabbi
Before
said.
you get to the exception, we'll get to the exception in a moment. We're coming back to that.
But it
We're going to
is.
come
I
to that.
think what you mean also, like when you say the residues left, my understanding of that, and tell me if that makes sense, is that by residue means the desires to still do some of those evil things that I did is still there. It's not completely gone. I'm just not engaging in it.
No.
Is that what you mean by residue?
No, because I'll tell you
Meaning
what.
I still struggle with it on some
No,
level.
we'll talk about that in chapters 10, 11, and 12.
All right.
That's where it's going to talk about. That's what's going to talk about how much transformation you've managed to do. Right now, what we're going to go back to in a moment is about the residue of the physical body. The physical body, which was actually nourished by the forces of Klippas Nogas. Even though the spiritual energy at this point you've already cleansed. The spiritual component you've cleansed. It's the physical residue that sustained your body by the food that was eaten, the kosher food that was eaten for the wrong reasons. That's the part we're going to be elevating in a moment.
Right.
But you're absolutely right.
Okay, so I just want to ask a follow-up question. What
Yeah.
about scientifically, the body regenerates itself every 7 years, so all the cells, they're gone. Like that's nature. So let's say I ate pork, 15 years ago or whatever around then.
What does it mean it regenerates itself every 7 years?
It's not there anymore. It's completely.
a new body?
It's new. That's why it's like amazing. We don't even realize it, but we're being renewed every single moment. Meaning God is continually recreating
Skin
you,
cells.
and it does.
But
It
not the
completely
DNA.
regenerates.
Well,
Not
the
the
That's
DNA.
one way of looking at
Maybe
it.
the
The other one
skin.
is impurities, like let's say heavy metals. If you're eating mercury and stuff like that then is in your body, that stays in your body.
Forever.
I mean, that's the whole point of the bottom feeders, fish.
Swordfish,
Right, but if you
stuff like
stop eating that, it is gone. It does leave
No,
the system.
No.
it's in your. My
That's-
dentist said.
Fine,
it's
so,
in
so
your
let me just say this. I just want to address it. Look,
Alright.
it's an interesting concept. I'm not very familiar with the 7-year thing, but let's go with it. Let's go with it and say, yeah, maybe that the impurities that are inside of the body, maybe they are regenerated every 7 years. There is such a concept, and we'll learn about it again in chapter 12, that it's not when we speak about our past, it's more about our present reality and where you're holding now. Right? It's like, it speaks about somebody who never sinned. And there's no such thing about somebody who never sinned. Mm-hmm. What we mean is somebody who never sinned in the state that they are in right now. Like right now. Would you murder someone? Probably nobody around this table would murder someone. But maybe it's not a good example. But basically the state that you're in right now is a reinvention of self. Right? So yeah, it could be. I mean, it could go very nicely along with the 7-year thing. But I want to just explain this a little bit. So we're talking about kafakela, right? So kafakela is the slingshot, right? The slingshot thing, which has a literal interpretation and has the metaphoric interpretation, which I explained to you, which is the dual realities, which is very painful to see. And you've experienced a lot of this in your writings, to me at least, about how you've been through some of this in this world, right? But now, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains, the previous Rebbe explains, that what causes kafakela is frivolous talk for unholy purposes. That's what causes, it's this power of speech abused for purposes that are not expressly holy. That's what causes kafakela. And what saves one from kafakela, what mitigates it, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, is through reciting Torah verses during your free time. Using your power of speech for holy purposes when you don't need to.
Just one of the hardest things.
Yeah, it's not easy.
I mean,
My grandfather was a carpenter in Jerusalem. He'd constantly be uttering words of Torah under his breath. But back to the chibut hakever, the beating up of the grave, I would say, why not? The beating of the grave, my understanding of what that means is actually indeed a physical thing, because it's redeeming not the spiritual confusion of the soul, but it's almost therapeutic, by the way. That slinging of the hollow of the sling, it's actually therapeutic because you're coming from a world of darkness and you're coming into a world of light, and it's almost like, where the hell am I? But by having these two screens, as much as it's painful, it actually helps you calibrate and realize where you are now, where you're supposed to be, right? But the beating of the grave, in my understanding, is more about the rotting, the decomposition of the body, because when it was nourished by forces, by energy that was negative, it's not sustainable, right? When you have negative energy, you can't sustain it. That's why death was introduced to the world when they ate from the tree of knowledge. When they ate from the forbidden tree, it couldn't have an immortal existence. Forbidden, that which is prohibited, is limited, right? Only that which is holy is forever. Right? So when you've eaten something which is unholy, that body cannot last and it must decompose, which is why the righteous, they don't decompose. Like it says about the body of Moses, Lo nas leicho. We learned about this in the Talmud the other day. His body didn't decompose. It says about the Rebbe Rashab, who's the author of this book, what we're learning in the morning now, the Kuntres Hamayim. It says when they moved his body 20 years after he died, because he was buried in Rostov on Don. And they were moving his body because the Russians were building like a gymnasium or a road through the cemetery. In the middle of the night, the Hasidim came and they moved his body so it wouldn't be desecrated. And it says they found his body. It was fresh as if he had just died. This is 1940
Wow.
in Russia.
So Tchia is amazing for them. It really is.
Yeah, so this is how I understand it. By the way, there's a way to be saved from kafakela, we said, was by reciting words of Torah in your free time. But the way to be saved from the beating of the grave, remember that angel, he asks you your name? Mm-hmm. Why do you forget your name? Because you just died. You're a little confused. But the way to remember your name and to be saved from or mitigate the chibut hakever, the beating of the grave, is by saying your Torah verse at the end of the silent Amidah in your prayers. At the end of the silent Amidah, there is a 3 times a day we say the Amidah. 3 times a day we say the Amidah, right?
Yeah.
At the very end of the Amidah, you'll notice.
Do you hear it done?
Yeah. Before that. It says over here. Here, it says it over here. Let's see where it is. You'll notice that appears in the Siddur.
It's keeping us from saying stuff.
What?
It's keeping us from saying stuff that we shouldn't be saying.
What do you mean, a kind of Torah?
It says over here, look, it says, it is customary, if you look at the, no, it's not that,
No,
it's
no,
not
no,
that.
it's not.
It's at the end of that, at the end of Elokai Netzor. It's the very last sentence, just before Oseh Shalom Bimromav.
Oh.
Before Oseh Shalom Bimromav, you say, Yihyu l'ratzonim refi v'hegyenu v'lefanecha ha'netzori v'gali. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Just before that, Yihyu l'ratzon, there's a note over here, a little baby 5, and it says, it is customary to recite a verse in which the first and last letters correspond to the first and last letters of one's own Hebrew name.
So could we do it like an ashrei?
For a list of verses, see page 582. So if you go to page 582 in the Siddur, page which very few people go on, you go to page 582 and you'll see a list of verses for people's names.
Oh, could we do that?
And this is a verse which you're supposed to memorize. Yeah, you should do it with the ladies, with your class. It's a verse, for example, my name is Dovid.
So it's Dalet and a Dalet.
Dalet and a Dalet, right? Dirshu Adonai v'yuzo bakshu panav tamid. Ends with a Dalet. My second name is Tzvi. Tzaru motzei k'metzauni mitzvi secho sha'ashuoi. Starts with a tzaddik, ends with a yud.
But does every one of them course? I mean, like if let's
Will
just
I
say
find mine
mine's a
in
kuf
there?
and a lamed.
Yeah.
So something's
What?
going to be different.
Will I find mine?
For sure. So I say 2 more verses. I say my Rebbe's verses. Menachem Mendel, because my Rebbe. When I get up there, I want to make sure they know my lawyer's number. Right? Menachem is Me'orenai Mesamach Lev Shmuel Tevet Adashin Otzem Mem Mem. And Mendel, Mem Lamed, is Matei V'alech Yaakov Mishkanesecha Yisrael. Right? Yeah. So let's look at your name. Your name is, yours is going to be a hard one because it's Kuf Lamed. It's going to be hard to find.
Well, Kuf, it's actually Krena. So it's
Krena. Was that an Ayin or Aleph?
Aleph.
Okay. Let's see if it's in here.
Yes, it's Aleph. Yeah.
You don't have a sample verse. I have to give you a custom verse. Anybody else? What's your name, Gail?
My Hebrew name?
Yeah.
Gita.
Gita?
Yeah, but I
Gita.
think it's with an olive, but I don't even know.
Gita.
I've never really
Give him
cared.
an
Yeah, you're not here either. How about you?
Rachel.
Rachel. It's a nice, easy name. It's a nice, standard name. Okay, so Rachel is here. So your verse is Re'u ato ki ani hu ve'ein elihim imodi ani misva achiyem mochatzti v'ani erpa ve'ein miyodi matzil.
Oh, beautiful!
And what I encourage you to do,
do,
is to print each person's verse for them,
Great.
translate it, and memorize it.
Okay, I
You
like
memorize your verse.
That. So far, this is the best.
What's your name? Leah.
So what does it do reading the
I'll tell you in a second. Leah, I'm just going to do one more verse for Leah here.
When the angel comes
Leah.
to your name, you'll know it.
Leah. Leah is Ladinai HaYeshua Al Amcha V'Irchasecha Selah.
Selah, that's a beautiful
Nice and easy.
one.
So
That's in Havdalah.
you have your name. You have 3 names, right?
Oh my God,
Yeah, you should keep it busy over here. 582. Help yourself.
Can you find something for me?
Of course I'll find you something. No, this is just a suggested list. But I'm actually thinking what I wanted to do recently was to do this for the entire community. I wanted every member of the community to have their verse on like a little certificate, their Hebrew verse, Hebrew name, the English
Oh, that's
translation,
beautiful.
and I want them to memorize it so they can commit to memory a personal piece of Torah.
That's a
I
great
love
idea.
it.
I love
And it's got
that.
everything connected to the
Yeah.
afterlife. It's a project I'm working on this summer.
I like
It's everything
that.
connected with the afterlife, and it's something to give you a little security blanket for the next world, you know?
Start with all those who attend your Tuesday class.
Yeah, Tuesday, this one here. Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you send me your names, put them on the WhatsApp group, and you send me your names, and we'll work on it.
Well, see, I was born with Krena, but I was called Krendel my
No,
whole
that's a
life.
form of endearment.
So what should I go with the Krena?
Krena, yeah.
Okay.
I should have worked out how to spell Krena. Is it an I or an Aleph?
I have to look.
Yeah, look it up. So basically, why am I saying all of this? Yeah.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
In terms of what happens in the grave, I remember, when my parents passed away, they had a shomer, or my mother's case, a shomeret. And I thought it was to protect the soul of the deceased. So is there a role?
No,
What's
shomer
the
is before
shomer?
burial.
Yes.
Yeah, so
The
no
shomer
one
is an
goes in.
honor guard
Yes,
to protect the deceased until they are interred underground.
yes.
The shomer is exempt once the person is buried. There's no more need for an honor guard. However, the chibut akever, as the name implies, the beating of the grave begins inside of the grave, not when the shomer is on duty. Got it? So now, the meaning of all this, to tie it all together, is that the chibut akever is the result of nourishing the physical body with the translucent klippa, with the diversion energy that was schlepped to the wrong direction for the wrong reason, for the buffet that you ate because you were eating with your eyes and not because you were eating with your soul, with your mind, right? Eating with your eyes is obviously gluttonous. Eating with your soul is mindful and purposeful eating, which is a holy purpose, which would elevate the food, as opposed to the eating for gluttony or avarice, which is downgrading the food. When your body benefits, derives physical flesh and blood from that food, then that part of the body is non-sustainable, and that denigrates. How the name exactly mitigates, right, it's not exactly clear. It's Kabbalistic. It's a Kabbalistic concept. But that's what we're told. And that's why it's a beautiful thing, regardless, to know your name and to know your Hebrew verse. This is your code, because when a person dies, it's like a shocking experience. And you get totally thrown out of proportion. But if you've been praying every day and saying your verse every day of your life, then it comes to you like second nature, right?
Do you know if the Rashab was very slim?
The Rebbe Rashab? I don't know. There's a picture of him here if you want to see it. He wants to know.
Oh,
Because if you're seeing, that doesn't look extremely slim. Okay, I thought he might have looked like you. Because if you take the energy balance approach to food, of you eat what you need for energy, there is the waste that goes out, there's the energy that you're using, you don't store fat. That would have been a way of thinking of that as you're only eating what you need.
Right, okay.
But what about when you say
But that's too
brachos?
physical.
When you say brachos,
No, it
that
is
elevates.
true.
Doesn't that
Like,
elevate?
I
the
do have a
food
hard
anyway?
time with
Yeah, that's good.
rabbis that are like severely overweight.
By the way,
I have a hard time with.
I'm sorry, what did you say about rabbis at work?
No, I mean whatever. I'm not saying I have a hard time with rabbis who are severely overweight
And
because
preaching this.
It's the
Yeah.
most. I think it's to me. I think it's. Other than murder, it's probably one of the worst sins in the world is gluttony. It's not like I've never engaged in it. I'm not saying I haven't. No, I'm not saying I haven't.
Don't
But-
forget, Cleo,
but-
that sometimes it's
but
a medical
as
thing.
a rabbi, you're authority.
But sometimes you
You're
can't
also
judge a book by
authority.
its cover.
Different.
You can't judge a book.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a medical thing. Sometimes
Oh,
people, I mean, I know
Anyway,
people
getting
that
back to
can't
the
lose weight.
brachos. Doesn't the brachos
Their hormones
wash-
imbalanced and things.
Yes, but not to that extent. I've
Rabbis
seen it,
being
right.
nice.
And
Anyways.
it's different between regular people and a rabbi who's an authority figure.
really?
It's a
He's
different
just saying
standard.
no.
Come on, let's pull it back in over here. So,
Anyway,
so back in over here. We're talking about so we just spoke about the beating of the grave, right? We spoke about how we can mitigate that. We spoke about the verses.
What about cutting? Why do you cut the
That's a
clothing?
different thing.
That's a form of mourning.
A mourning.
Mourning?
It's a
Yeah.
manifestation
Yes.
of mourning, basically.
Nothing based on this.
No.
No.
But what I wanted you to realize is that klipas noga is very real in our lives, even though it's obviously invisible, the energy levels within the various foods, it still is something which is all around us and something which we ultimately will pay the price for in our chibot hakever. And again, in my interpretation of that, which is the decomposition of the grave. Now the Alter Rebbe explains in the end of chapter 8, which is the part we didn't do last week. He says, remember that which is schlepped into the opaque klippa, the 3 impure klippas, remains in a state of isur, of prohibition, of tied up, until you do teshuvah meyahava, right? Teshuvah out of love, right? So if you were able to elevate it, that's great. But if you didn't elevate it, then the way to elevate it will be through Gehinnom.
Through what?
Through Gehinnom, purgatory. The way to elevate the components of your soul which were schlepped into the 3 impure klippas, that's why we have to go to Gehinnom. That's why we have to go to Gehinnom, and it depends. Sins of passion and lust take us into Gehinnom of fire. Sins of laziness and melancholy and depression schlep us into the Gehinnom of cold. Measure for measure. So you start to get a picture of divine justice. You start to get a picture of divine justice. It's not just some place that they try to motivate the masses to be good people. It's actually measure for measure regarding the kind of sin that was experienced, right? And then there's one final point that the Alter Rebbe makes in the end of the chapter, which is like this. He says that so for example, the sin of neglecting the study of Torah. The sin of neglecting the study of Torah, because it's a mitzvah to study Torah at all moments of every day, every moment of every day. Not including when you go to the bathroom, not including when you're sleeping, not including when you're eating, not including when you're doing something which you have to do. But it's the rest of the time when you're doing nothing, where you could be doing something meaningful. And again, not including the time that you need to relax. But the time when you could be studying Torah and you're not studying Torah, right? If your threshold is once a week and you didn't make it to your once a week Torah study, that is the sin of bittul Torah, of abandoning, neglecting the study of Torah, and that's what leads a person to the Gehinnom of snow, to the cold Gehinnom, which is because the sin of laziness brought about to a place of a repentance or a healing, which is one that is passive. It's not like fired up, right?
I have a question. I was always taught that we should always pray and hope that our punishments for our sins happen in this world. So rather than later on in the next world.
That's what I was told.
So,
Okay.
And life can be very unbearable, for just about everybody has their sorrows and all that.
Look.
And sometimes, I don't know, I've always felt that sometimes you're punished. I know it's a very misogynist way to look. I understand that, but
Sometimes
I
you
was raised
justify
that
your
way.
sorrows
Well,
by saying, well, at least I'm getting my punishment in this world.
Right.
yeah, that you're getting your punishment in this world, which is what we actually want to do rather than in the next.
Right. Look, there is some truth to that. But I'm opposed to the whole idea of praying for punishment altogether.
Not praying for the punishment, but when it happens, to sort of justify it. Well,
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely a negative approach.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's one perspective. Like I don't share it, which I validate.
No.
yours. I'm just saying
It's the way I was raised.
Right. I'm
it's
just
very
saying it's
anti-Hasidic.
It's not universal.
Yeah.
It's an emphasis on darkness. I mean, it's an emphasis on the problem and the punishment. And, why don't you focus on the light? Why don't you just do the teshuvah and you won't have to deal with it?
Why is my window
Right?
falling
Well,
off?
both of those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I also think suffering is optional. Like, do I struggle? Yes, I have internal struggles because I'm trying to overcome, but that's not suffering. That's no different than going to the gym and having weights. It's
Really?
uncomfortable, but
But
Right,
I don't feel
It's really
suffering in
all
my
of the
life
above.
at all.
So it's all of the above. And
You've had it good.
You have some suffering
No, I
and
haven't had
punishment,
it good. I've
and
had
then
a
you have
lot,
stuff
but it's
that
part
you
of my
didn't account
journey. I
for.
Right.
just look at it differently.
Right, exactly. So I think it is all of the above. And I also like your analogy because when you think of punishment as therapy,
Yes.
it changes as well.
No, that's true.
right?
Absolutely.
Changes the law. So look,
It's a consequence. I don't look. I mean, my life wasn't easy, but I don't feel I'm suffering every day. I just feel like I'm going through a growth thing, and I'm experiencing discomfort because of the choices, bad choices.
Look, I have to tell you, it is a little unusual.
Well, that's true.
Corey, it is a little unusual for Chabad Hasidus to be talking about the various forms of punishment of the
that is
afterlife.
very
But it's interesting to see it. No, this stuff exists. It's interesting to see how Chabad Hasidus addresses this stuff.
Yes.
And it's very heartwarming to see that it's not in any malice. It's actually a benefit to the soul that it's given this kind of therapeutic treatment. It's like you go to the chiropractor. That when the chiropractor jumps on you and beats you up, is that a bad thing? It's actually, thank God, he's willing to take me in as a patient so he can fix my back.
As long as I can walk straight when I go.
Right.
When I leave, I'm happy.
So it might hurt like hell during the
Wouldn't
process.
change if we didn't feel like crap.
The
We
worst
did
punishment,
wrong.
by the way, is karet,
Yes.
which is being cut off.
But
That's
what
where they
does
want to
that
have
mean,
nothing.
actually?
They want to have nothing to do with you. They say, listen, you're not good enough for any therapy. Get out of here. Goodbye. You're lost. You have to wander in limbo. Nowhere. That's the worst.
Is chorus a this world thing, or is
No,
it
it's the next world. It's a
Oh, okay.
spiritual thing being cut off.
So how does this really differ from Christian theology? I mean, the only thing that strikes me is the idea that it's temporary. And with Christian theology, it seems to be once you go where you go, you're there
I think
forever.
it couldn't be more different than Christian theology because
But the concept
Christian
of it-
theology is about, like you said, it's about eternal damnation, and it's all about an attitude of vengeance. Whereas this is not eternal damnation. In fact, it's not damnation at all. It's actually the same as taking your suit to the cleaners and your car to the car wash, where you don't go there forever. You just go there for an hour and you get your car cleaned and then you're good to go. So it couldn't be more different.
But chorus that's what you're saying.
The concept of kares, I never heard of a Christian concept of kares, but not that I know much about Christianity.
Like eternal damnation?
No, it's not eternal.
How are you cut off in the next world?
Cut off from the nation of from the Jewish nation.
Basically, nobody wants to talk to you. You're excommunicated.
In the next world.
Yeah.
So your soul in the next world doesn't rejoin the family, doesn't rejoin the community, the Jewish community?
Nope.
Does that come from you cutting yourself off from the Jewish people when you're alive, so you did it to yourself?
They cut off.
Special-
They
yeah,
cut
if
you
there's certain
off.
Right,
sins
but
that
I'm
will
saying,
be
is that
cut
a
you off.
consequence of you making a choice to cut off the Jewish nation when you're alive? So now it's
Well, let me give you an example. If you guys are into this stuff, then let me just give you a little example of what we're talking about here. So, in the end of Gemara Sukkah, the very end of the Talmud Sukkah, tells a story of the family of Bilga, the Kohen family of Bilga, who lived during the time of the Roman conquest. And they had a daughter. Her name was Miriam. Miriam not only rebelled against her Kohen family, she married out of the faith. She actually married a Roman general. Not just a Roman general, she married the very Roman general that broke into the temple to destroy it. I mean, that's pretty bad stuff. Right? So here she is, Miriam bas Bilga. Miriam, daughter of Bilga. The Talmud tells us a story that basically the apple doesn't fall far away from the tree. The entire family was punished. Their privileges were taken away from them, their priestly privileges. Might have been during the Greeks. In any event, their privileges were taken away from them because the Talmud says that a child repeats what the parents have been talking about, and if she left the faith, it's got to be because there was something which she had heard at home on some level. So there was some weakness in the faith of the entire family. So the Talmud tells us that what happened was she followed this husband of hers, this general, this non-Jewish, anti-Semitic, Jew-hating husband of hers, into the temple. And as he broke into the temple, she took her shoe off and she whacked the altar, twice. And she said, "Lucus, lucus, wolf, wolf. Ad Masai atamechale mamoinan shel Yisrael. Until when will you devour the money of Israel like a wolf? The altar is eating their sacrifices. Ve'ein ata omed lahen b'shas tzarasan, and yet you don't stand for them at the time of their distress. She was mocking God. Here you are, you eat their food, but you don't protect them when they need you. Where are you? Right? Terrible. Fast forward 2,000 years. In the 60s or 70s, it was in 770 Eastern Parkway in the Rebbe's shul, when the Rebbe was having a farbrengen, talking about something in the parsha, when in the middle of the farbrengen, the Rebbe suddenly changed tone of voice, became very serious, and he started talking about Miriam Bas Bilga. I'm pretty sure it was in 1966, 65, when the Rebbe's mother passed away. And he started talking about Miriam Bas Bilga, and he said, you know why Miriam Bas Bilga did this? She didn't do this because she hated God. In fact, she loved God. Right? She had the courage to stand up and protest the injustice of God having abandoned his people. She was the only one who had the courage and the guts to say something about it. This wasn't an act of rebellion. This was a cry for love. That's how the Rabbi explained this.
Is it really possible that God could abandon his people and not us abandoning him?
Okay, so that's an interesting discussion. But that's what she did. She said, how can you allow this to happen? That's what she did, right? And that's what the Rebbe explained. A while later, when the Chassidim asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe explained, by the way, the Rebbe explained that she represents the paradigm of the unbreakable Jewish soul. That even the soul of a Jewish woman who married out of the faith and to an anti-Semite and a general who destroyed the temple, violated the temple, even she, what bothers her is why God is abandoning his people. This is the eternity of the Jewish soul. It's unbreakable. Mm-hmm. She was the example of that.
Couldn't you say the same thing during the Holocaust? Can't you?
Potentially, yeah, for sure. But I'm telling you a story right now, right?
Yeah.
So later on, and everybody used this as an example for the mivtza, the campaign of lighting Shabbos candles with every Jewish woman and girl. The Rebbe said, he started this campaign like in memory of his mother, and he said, every Jewish woman and girl should light Shabbos candles, regardless of whether they believe in God or not, or whether they keep Shabbos or not. Like Miriam Bas Bilga, every Jewish soul is a Jewish soul. And the Rebbe used this as an example. Later on, they asked the Rebbe, why did you suddenly talk about Miriam Bas Bilga, like out of context? The Rebbe didn't say so explicitly, but he led them to believe that her soul has been wandering excommunicated for 2,000 years. Not good enough to be accepted into heaven. And not good enough even to be made into the therapy of Gehinnom. We don't believe in hell. Hell is damnation. Purgatory is a place of purging and cleansing. She wasn't good enough for purging and cleansing until a mortal was able to exhibit such unconditional love for her that she was able to have been given the benefit of the doubt to bring out the positive side of her.
You mean the Rebbe did that?
The Rebbe did that.
Wow.
So that was Matir Asuri?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to play for you a beautiful song which I want you to meditate upon. Hold on.
So are the people, the souls in chorus, they will be resurrected as well with the rest of the Jewish people or not?
I would think so. 1 second. Find the song for you.
Why would they?
Here, you ready? I'm going to play for you the song. You ready? The song is called The Night the Soul Was Saved, okay? I want you to listen to the song. It's a very beautiful song. It's a story I just told you in song, in meditation. You ready? You may want to close your eyes. It's beautiful.
is defiled, victim to the madness of a world gone wild. Standing near the altar, not afraid to be seen, she lashes out and strikes it. Her words are so obscene. Hungry wolf, how Israel's wealth you devour, yet you don't stand by them in their most troubled hour. She's the daughter of Bilga and wife of a Greek. She'd abandoned her people, she despises the weak. Punished by the priests, shunned from above, she traded her people for a forbidden love. Decrying the altar, did she have no shame? Now forever tarnished was the Bilga name. Decrying the altar, did she have no shame? Now forever tarnished was the Bilga name. Many years have passed and thousands have appeared to sit before and hear the voice of a leader so revered. But they were all surprised at the Rebbe's words. He had someone else in mind to stand up for this daughter of Bilga, to set things right. The people of your time had thought that you had strayed, but you pounded the altar to defend the betrayed. The voice of compassion for a woman who dared to show her own people that she really cared. Punished by the priests, shunned from above, at last there was one who had only words of love. For 2,000 years she carried her shame. How she longed for someone to liberate her name. Roaming through time, had this tortured soul, nowhere to rest, nowhere to hide, no words to console. Roaming through time, had this tortured soul, nowhere to rest, nowhere to hide, no words to console. Punished by the priests, shunned from above, at last there was one who had only words of love. Her time had come now to enter heaven's gates. From those words of comfort, the night a soul was saved. Her time had come now to enter heaven's gates. From those words of comfort, the night a soul was saved. Her time had come now to enter heaven's gates. From those words of comfort, the night a soul was saved.
That was a beautiful song, huh?
Wow, I just, the Rabbi actually liberated
He
her.
was ahead of his time.
Yeah, he is a little late.
Well,
So it's interesting how that thought process, you said it was just a Farbrengen and all of a sudden he slipped into
Yeah.
a
Yeah, it was in a
different
Farbrengen,
self.
and suddenly the Rebbe, it was like weird.
well,
How the
something
Rebbe
must
suddenly
have
started
happened
speaking. Yeah. What happened? So what
to
happened?
him before.
No, what happened is that her soul was in limbo, was in kares.
Yeah,
Shunned from,
but he just made a...
banished by the priest, shunned from
Yeah,
above.
yeah.
She had nowhere to go. her soul wandered into 770. That's what happened here. Her soul was seeking solace. For 2,000 years she carried her shame. How she longed for someone to liberate her name. Right? And here was the Rebbe who was able to exhibit such extraordinary love. Such extraordinary love to a woman who was hated. She was the paradigm of irreverence and everything that we abhor. And the Rebbe said, no! This was the woman who had the courage to say what nobody else had the courage to say. Hashem, where are you? How can you do this for us, to us? And by giving her the benefit of the doubt, it was through this that her soul was liberated and she was welcomed to heaven's gate. My kids love the song. You ask my Zevi what this song is about. My Zevi, my 5-year-old, and he'll tell you. It's about the woman who was nasty on the outside, but kindful on the inside. That's what he'll tell you. She's nasty on the outside, but she's kindful on the inside. We listened to the story as Devorah was born. That's when the song came out, as Devorah was born. So on the way to and from the hospital, I was with the kids a lot. And this is my babysitting. I'm with the kids, I taught them the song, and we were going through. I told them the whole story. And it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful concept. Teaches us so much about lost souls. Teaches us
about the Rebbe's love was so endless. I mean, it was limitless.
So Charlotte says something about too late, right? I don't know, Charlotte. Maybe, what do I know about these things? Maybe this was her time.
Yeah.
I think the Rebbe knew. I would think that the Rebbe knew what was going on. It's such a beautiful song. I've always loved the story, but when the song came out, I was in tears,
Oh yeah, this is...
Because, it tells you so much about Avas Yisrael, about loving your fellow Jew. And the limits of that, we think, okay, I'll let you sit in my seat in Shul today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so much more than that. Have you truly challenged yourself to love the unlovable?
I'm trying. Yes.
Can you see beyond your own little world and your own pigeonhole limitations? What do you think, Gail?
I feel like that was my story, and this is my 770. That's how I feel.
No,
Yeah,
that's
it's certainly my story
Wow.
too.
Really related to it all.
That's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Well, yeah,
That's true. This is
the other thing
770.
too. I mean, time in our world is different from godly time. So, to Charlotte's point about 2,000 years, I mean, we don't know once we enter that other realm.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
how
not
fast
the
or slow it
same
goes.
as,
Yeah, that's
24
not-
hours. It's not limited the way we feel it.
Time is different.
How do
Time
they
is
know?
different. I mean, God, Hashem
Who?
is timeless and encompasses all time.
How
So
does someone know that her soul is resting?
How does someone know?
That her soul
And
is...
Miriam Basbilga?
Yes.
Well, we don't know, but
Hopefully the Rebbe.
that's what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe isn't just a charismatic leader.
When did that story first appear?
This story happened
No, not the Rebbe's.
in the
story,
Talmud,
But yeah.
in the days of the Greeks. It was in the days of the Greeks. Remember, the Greeks defiled the temple.
Where was the original?
Oh, in the end of
about it? Where did you
read it.
see the story of Miriam Asvili?
I'll bring it to you right now.
Not the Rebbe, but the origin.
So it was the time of the Maccabees?
Yeah.
Must have been, yeah.
You'll go directly to the
Well, no, the Maccabees were against the Romans.
No.
Oh, yes, you're right. Okay.
I will disagree
Good.
with the Maven.
Good.
Yeah, I'll read you the
Thank
story.
I'm glad you took the notes right.
Yeah, the story goes like this.
My invisible notes.
How beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Which then makes it more than 2,000.
I have to go.
It's like 2,200 years ago. Here, it says. Where's the story? Here it is. Okay, here. Okay, the watch of Bilga always divides in the south. The Gemara explains why the watch of Bilga, the
Kohen.
their slot, whatever, their time, was penalized. The rabbis taught in a brayso there was once an incident involving Miriam, the daughter of one of the members of the watch of Vigler, who became an apostate and went and married an officer of one of the Greek kings. When the Greeks subsequently entered the sanctuary in the days of Matisyahu ben Yochanan, Chanukah, she, Miriam, scornfully kicked with her sandal on top of the altar and exclaimed, Lukus, Lukus, Ad Mosat Mechalem Amainin Shel Yisrael, wolf, wolf, how long will you consume the money of Israel? V'yat Oimed La'aleim B'shas Adchakim, you do not stand by them in the time of pressing need. And when the sages heard of this, they permanently affixed Bilga's ring to the floor of the courtyard and they sealed her alcove. I mean, they punished the family, right? They punished the whole family. So, according to the person that says it was the actions of Miriam, the daughter of Bilga, became an apostate, there is a difficulty. Why would you punish the whole family because of the daughter? Abaya said, yes, it is correct to punish the whole watch, as people say. The utterances of a child in public express the views of either his mother or his father. Okay, and that's the end of the Gemara Sukkah. This is the Gemara Sukkah. It's the end of Gemara Sukkah. So the end. Just to conclude this thought over here is that was very deep. That was very, very deep. What you and Rosalind both said.
I also want to say that I feel like you are the Rebbe. Like he would be really proud of you because you gave me that unconditional love when I came here, even though I was dating someone not Jewish and ready to go,
I was
whatever.
married to someone not Jewish.
I didn't get that judgment, so I feel like you really embody his teachings by.
Well, thank you for that, Gail. I'll tell you, the role of a shliach is to be transparent,
and also
not translucent and not opaque, but to allow the light of the one who sent us to shine through us, and that way we can achieve extraordinary goals far beyond our own capacity, because that's what a shliach is. A shliach is the meshalech, the one who sent him. So if I'm able to touch you on that level, wow, I'm just thrilled that obviously I must be allowing the Rebbe to shine through me without blocking it. And the way you said it was just so beautiful. That was your story, and this is your 770. That was so beautiful, and you said the same thing.
Did you ever go to,
it's funny what goes through your mind as you are expressing these thoughts and information to us. And the thing that I thought about, which I thought was the weirdest thing, I have this first cousin, Norman, and he was in Fort Dix at the time. This is many years ago, and he had his first leave, and he went to his parents. And he was so excited to go home, and his mother opened the door, smacked him across the face, and said, "Don't you know it's Shabbos? You can't drive."
Okay.
That was her, and that bothered me so. Here, her son was coming home after months of being away, and the first thing she thought of was to crack him across the face and send him.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a fire and brimstone approach.
I think you should encourage the students also to go on Rebbe.org to get familiar with
the Rebbe.org, I think it is.
The Rebbe.org to get familiar with who the Rebbe really was through his videos and his teachings and his talks and his music and his singing and story. I mean,
I didn't even know about that.
See, because that's the thing, you know. Him not being alive now, people think of him as in the past, but he's in the present.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful website.
But that's it. This is the story, folks, about today's the lesson, which we didn't even touch on chapter 9 yet. We'll have to save it for next week. But at least to finish chapter 8, we spoke about a lot of these. Next week's Yantif.
No, it's over. Monday night. So are we having
class. So we spoke about the not the punishments but the consequences. And of the afterlife, and based upon how we lived our lives, and to think that even something like Kores can be reversed with our kavana, with our intention, and that's what the Rebbe was doing. Like we spoke last week, that our intention can lift up the klippas noga or drop it down. We can also lift up a soul. You can make someone or break someone with how you perceive them. Let's pass that forward.
It's really funny how this today touched me so emotionally, out of no place.
It's the voice of your soul. It's coming out.
Yes, he transformed the world.
Your soul is starting to come out.